So my name is Lilliam Barrios-Paoli. I'm here with Dr. Ruth Finkelstein. We're here to talk about cumulative disadvantage. So would you please explain to us what cumulative disadvantage is?
Yes. It's an idea that people have been looking at for a little while. That the idea is that over the course of your life, you grow more advantaged if you've had an advantaged life, or disadvantaged if your life has been one of challenges and disadvantages. So if you think about it across the life course, if you think about how functional are we as human beings, we're all born blobs and we can't do anything. We're completely not functional, right? We need others to survive for even a day. But rapidly we get more functional and sort of peak sometime the age that all the cameramen are, and women, the camera women, are in their late teens, early 20s, you sort of reach your peak. And then we all sort of gradually descend, very gradually, downhill in our functionality. But the idea of cumulative disadvantage is if you've had a really hard life because you're poor, because you've been discriminated against your whole life, because you have very severe challenges, then you descend down to a lower level of functionality more quickly, and that level is lower.
So is there such a thing as cumulative advantage as well?
Absolutely. So, we were talking before the cameras came on about the news story about the rich parents who buy their kids into rich schools. Yeah. This is a case in point of cumulative intergenerational advantage, right? And then they're going to go on to benefit more and more and more.
Is this really new? I mean, we have known for a long time that poverty is associated with poor health and other negative outcomes. So how come is this different?
Right. The way that this is different is most of that work on inequities and disparities that you're talking about is actually cross-sectional. So we say, okay, if we have an exposure to tobacco, and we have other sort of disadvantages and so on, the incidence of emphysema and cancer and the negative outcomes of that are greater for people who are poorer than for people who are better off, who then also get better medical care and so on. But this is saying across the life course, it gets worse, it gets more. So this is an inherently through time idea, and anything that is a through time idea is a big important idea for aging, because aging is at the end point of life.
Right. So how would you use it? How is it useful?
Well, it's useful in a few different ways. For one thing, in the field of aging, there's kind of this debate that goes on where some people say aging is an opportunity and old people are fabulous.
These are usually young people that say that.
And then there are other people that say aging is a challenge and it's kind of a drag. And one thing is to recognize that they're both right. So for some people, it's a pretty great state of affairs. And for other people, it's a far less good state of affairs. But more importantly is to recognize that if cumulative disadvantage means that when old, people who have had hard lives have really hard lives. And it informs us that we need to intervene earlier in the life course if we're wanting to have people have better lives.
Yeah, it sounds somewhat deterministic, so it's a little scary. So, the idea that maybe if you've grown old and I have cumulative disadvantages, then there's nothing to do. That's a pretty scary thought.
Right. And so luckily, it's not deterministic. The first thing to remember is that these are averages, they're population averages, and so they're not describing the experience of each individual. Obviously, there are people who've had really hard lives who go on to achieve amazing things, many people, and they do that across their life course and in old age. But also, this is not sort of a decree that can't be addressed. It's a call to action that requires us to understand, study, and act on the social forces that make the outcomes in people's lives less good. And that means to make education available to people as adults. It means to equalize access to health care. It means it's not okay for housing to be not okay and us to be complacent about that. It means that everybody has to have food security, and it also means that we need a purpose in our lives across our life. Whoever we were, we need to be able to be.
Is there a best time to intervene, or any point is good?
Well, a lot of...
or not equally as good.
Right. We don't know enough about that. This is something that people are studying quite a bit. People know something about intervening in childhood, and that is, of course, a whole field. But it's very important to me, as someone who works in aging, to believe, and there's evidence to support this belief, that there are interventions possible during adulthood, that it's not sort of a done deal when you grow up. You know, once you reach adulthood, you're sort of sealed onto the curve that you're going to live on, but that you can change your future. And not you as an individual, but we as a society. Because one of the myths that I think cumulative disadvantage helps us to disrupt is individuals can't just yank themselves up by their own socks or bootstraps or any other piece of their anatomy. We as a society have to restructure opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I think the expectation that people can raise themselves by themselves is a little bit to assuage our feeling of guilt to one degree, and, sort of take me off the hook. I mean, well, you should do what you should do.
Right.
We know that children, there's critical points in their growth that if you don't intervene, bad things happen. We know that by 2, the brain is pretty much formed. We know that literacy, if you don't achieve reading by 2nd grade, you're going to have a really tough time. So is there such a comparable thing in old age, or are we sort of that plastic that we can be changed around?
So far, it looks like we're that plastic that we can be changed around slowly, because nothing is as easy for us in adulthood as everything was for us in childhood, except common sense. Common sense is way easier for us in adulthood.
That's good news.
But all the tasks of change and adaptation and learning take more focus and time and effort after you're done with that rapid period. But the point here is that they're perfectly possible across the life course. And so it isn't ever too late to help someone's circumstances be better, or help a community to better their own circumstances, though I think we do understand that earlier is better.
Yes. So you seem to be saying that it takes a village, just to use an old cliche. Yeah. So where can we apply this to East Harlem? How can we do that, and how can we engage the community and the not-for-profits in East Harlem?
Well, one of the things that I hope would become clear to people is that we're not dealing with a kind of either-or between generations, but to recognize that investment in each generation is investment in every generation, both because they're going to grow to be those generations, but also because the more so the society, the community, the neighborhood has advantages and opportunities and things to do and ways to learn, the more so everybody can benefit from those. And I think that in this time of scarcity and time of struggling with one another kind of for scraps, that we run into the tendency to have groups battling one another who would be best served by coalescing together. And I actually hope that we can be part of helping that to happen.
That'd be great. And how can other members of the hunter community help?
Well, you know, we don't know nearly enough about this whole idea of how the life course works. It's really, I mean, we sort of say it, aging in the life course, and psychologists have sort of know a little bit about it from their specific point of view. But the fact is that we don't look at the relationship between what happens at one point in life to what happens at the next point, what happens to the next point. And I have this sort of fantasy in my mind that if all the research and work that all the faculty at Hunter did could get put up on a kind of number line, put up on a life course line, and we'd be able to integrate it together into an understanding of the life course, that we would get forward much faster than any individual discipline could do.
So I remember when you were doing the work around Age Friendly that you told us to look at all of the city services through an aging lens.
Yeah.
So it would be the academics to look at what they're doing through an aging lens.
Exactly. This is the same old idea.
No, it's not so old, and it does work.
Yes.
So is there any good advice that you could give us going forward in terms of taking this to the next step?
Well, I think for us as a community to familiarize ourselves with what we know about the life course and what we know about the relationships between our built and social environments and our life course, and to respect the social and environmental forces as causing biological changes rather than the reverse, where we conceptualize biology as causing aging. I think our social lives cause aging, which gets expressed through biology.
Thank you. Thank you. I really thank you for such a timely and important discussion.
And I thank you.